Most people today are captivated by stories, and everyone watches either YouTube or Instagram or something on TikTok. And when it comes together, it does tell a story. You might not always be making a film, you might not always be creating a piece of art, honestly, but you are always storytelling. And what is the message you're trying to tell? When it comes to that, as this bar of entry is so low and everyone is trying to tell a story or share a message, then there comes the concept of undistracting excellence.
Hello, and welcome back to the Be Unbound podcast. I'm your co-host, David Rethemeyer.
And I'm your co-host, Jonathan Brush.
And today we have on somebody who I am used to calling my co-host, actually, of the Be Unbound podcast. For those of you who have been longer time listeners, Abe Chen joining the show today.
We're looking forward to Abe. And for those listening, we're going to talk a little bit about the video track that Unbound is offering. But if you are not interested in the video track and you're not interested in rolling Unbound, that's fine. Hang in here because Abe says some really cool stuff, has some really cool reflections on videography, on art, and on something he calls undistracting excellence. And look, if you have no interest in videography, Unbound tracks, all those kinds of things, this is worth it just for Abe's explanation of and understanding of undistracting excellence. I learned a lot, and I think that you're going to really enjoy this episode. Abe Chen, welcome home. It is so good to have you here. Welcome back is not good enough. For our audience, this is a really cool reunion. We've had a little bit of a tour of previous podcast hosts here. So we had Ben Billups on not too long ago, who was the guy that kicked the whole thing off. But the guy that built it was very much Abe along with David. And in many ways, I'm the replacement. I'm the imposter sitting here. It took over Abe's spot. And so now Abe has gone on to some really cool things we're going to talk about here shortly. Some of those cool things, including getting married recently. So we were just recently at Abe's wedding. It wasn't that long ago. And looking forward to talking to you about a bunch of things on this particular episode. But Abe, welcome home. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me. It is very nostalgic and very good to be back here in the studio like this, breaking out all my gear and man, it's been a minute. I'm rusty, but it's good to be back.
Well, we were just joking around before we went live here, and we normally give guests a little bit of instructions. And I told David, I said, I just feel like an imposter. Like I can't really give Abe Chen instructions on how to be in a podcast. He's generally the man that used to be giving me instructions on how to be the guest on this podcast. So we're delighted to have you back. So Abe, let's kick off first a little bit here. Tell us what you're doing right now. And then we've got some things to talk about because you're doing some really exciting things with Unbound and a slightly different role. And we're going to talk about that shortly. But tell us a little bit about what's going on in your life here. Oh, recently. What's happening in the last couple of months, Abe?
Yes, as you said, I have been very blessed by the Lord. I fairly recently got married to, as many of you know, another Unbounder, Abigail, now Chen. So praise God for that. It's been amazing to settle now in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I am currently working as the senior videographer for a local marketing agency. And so it was really interesting to transition into that role where they very much do much more commercial work, a lot more corporate shooting and videography and things like that. And been very busy with that. As at the time of recording, summer is their busy season where they do a home improvement TV show and they shoot throughout the summer, edit during the winter, and they broadcast the year after. And so right now is hustle season where I'm out on shoots and traveling all over the Great Plains area, really. Just capturing houses and different businesses and things like that.
Well, that's cool. That's something that we know you're pretty well suited for. So, Abe, that's one thing, and that's probably the primary pay the bills thing right now. But Abe also has ventured out, has started something called RAP, Resilient Art Productions, and sort of a standalone studio. And we're excited to see. I have probably not as big of dreams as Abe has for this, but I have big dreams just in terms of knowing what is possible and looking forward. And it's been an absolute fantastic blessing for us. We're going to have Resilient Art Productions RAP come back and shoot some of the stuff for Apex, which is just a few weeks away. So that's really cool. But the other aspect of this is really neat, is that Abe is going to come back in his capacity as, maybe a little bit of both, but primarily from the RAP end, but working for Unbound, to run our brand new video production specialty track. So, Abe, tell us a little bit about what that's going to look like. So, just give the audience a little taste of what the video production track's going to be like.
Yes. Videography doesn't involve art, but I'm not competing with Sarah. So if you've not heard that episode, go listen to that and find out about the art track there. But I think that's actually a fascinating starting point to talk about art. I have, as I've been developing the video track, I really modeled this as something where I want to call this a mentorship track, because I really wanted to focus on what would young Abe, really 10 years ago as a teenager, what would he want and what is he looking for as he is trying to figure out this world of film / videography, trying to get into the professional sense, the professional world. And just thinking about how videography is very much a art. There's so many things there to learn, but it is also very much a profession. You are a professional. And so that was a big thing that I want to dip into, where yes, you're a storyteller. Yes, you're an artist. Yes, you are a professional, how to strive for excellence. And going back to what young Abe would have liked, again, a mentorship track. Technology is moving so fast these days, especially David, there's so many things that are coming out very quickly. And one of the big things that I saw when I was looking at considering a film major at schools, or what we call box schools, or just thinking of different video programs, is that there is such a focus on teaching the technical things, which is important. You need to know the basics of how to operate a camera and how to light a room and all these different things. However, so much more than that, videography is learning how to paint with light and then how to see things. And technology moves so fast that what is in a textbook this year will be out of date really next year, honestly. And I want to allow students a chance to learn how to learn, and also really just dive into what it means to be a videographer. So much more than the technical specs of like, oh, this camera, this thing or whatnot. To have a mentor to say, hey, these are some of the things that you want to think about as a videographer, as a professional. This is what we face in this world.
Well, I appreciate that perspective, Abe, because I was thinking that when you and I talk to students often, and young students, and they say, well, I want to get into film, then there is sort of an idea like, I need to go to film school, or I need to go to, we call them box schools. I need to go to box school and major in videography or something like that. And that kind of causes us to bang our head against the wall a little bit. And so then sort of tout, oh, Unbound has this great track. I just want to back up and ask you to reflect a little bit on your career. So I've gotten to watch your development as a professional, and I mean that in every sense of the word, over the last several years. And so what is really striking to me is that you have put in the time, and maybe it's really important to just say this was not an easy road. So I've watched Abe, start with interning for free for Unbound, move into a paid contractor position, supplement that with his own studio work and shooting weddings and those kinds of things, pick up some other freelance stuff here and there, then develop and sort of move out and start his own production company, which is not an easy task. I mean, it's a long road, right? So you generally don't often just step into that and all of a sudden be rolling in the money. So along with that came an ability to move into a full-time, gig that you're doing now, and a full-time job to start round out those skills. And yet, during that time, I would say, from my perspective, you've gained a colossal amount of knowledge, a tremendous amount of skill. And then if you just talk about reps, the amount of different places you have been and things that you have shot, and that ranges from drama to storytelling to commercials to social media to, to documentary type stuff. I mean, it's just almost anything you can think of. And so it's not an easy track. It's not been a short track necessarily, but it's been a track that's paid its way. And from my perspective, it's been a track that has turned out some extraordinary talent. I see Abe as one of the best video talents I know out there, which is why I'm just absolutely thrilled to still have him be able to come in his capacity from Rap and help out with some Unbound events. But not just that, to be able to teach students. But talk a little bit about your choice, because you could have easily gotten into a film school or gone to a track like that. So why did you go that direction? And reflecting back on it, I just painted a bit of a rosy picture of it, but don't listen to me. Looking back on it, would you do it again? Was it the right choice or not?
Yes. I want to be very clear in that I am not discounting any of the trade schools or film majors and things like that. And we here in Unbound know that there is a place for these different things. But I think a lot of young people go into the world of videography again, really with that rosy picture that you're talking about, where there are certain steps and this is the way to go. And once again, going back to the mentorship aspect, there were a lot of people who spoke into my life, who pointed me in certain directions, who taught me lessons that I would not have learned in a technical sense in a typical program. So for example, one of the biggest lessons I learned that I really am excited to talk about in the video track is the sense of identity, right? So much of what you do when you are doing something that you love and you want to tell a story, and so much of your ego and pride gets wrapped up in it, and then you become a videographer. That's your identity. But I distinctly remember going through the Unbound program, I would say two things. Number one, learning from just so much advice from other mentors to take the communications major route instead of just film, because I realized that learning communication allowed me to take specific classes in business, in public speaking, that really informed what I learned as a videographer or someone interested in that world. In Apex 2017, one of the speakers, Josh Wilson, sat me down, and he was a videographer. He had his own production company, and I was just young Unbounder buzzing with all these questions and what do you use? What do you do? How do you do this? And he really instilled in me the truth that my identity cannot be in my work. And that is a big temptation for people in the video world. Instead, as a Christian, my identity truly needs to be in Christ. And that is what informs everything else that I do. And so going back to if I regret the path, I really don't. I've learned so much from truly learning by doing. And that is something that there's plenty of mistakes I've made along the way that I hope to encourage and instill in students to make slightly less mistakes. But there is just a sense of learning by doing and going through failure and how to deal with that uniquely as a videographer, because you're in a world where your whole job, honestly, is not to fail. Like, sure, there's editing, but that's the point, right? Like, that's something I really deal with right now. And I've struggled with that through the years, even as an Unbound student. I'm just kind of really like just baring my heart. But being in the video world and working with Unbound in video, I would often feel like, is failure really an option when, let's say you're shooting Apex, and David and Jonathan, you very much know this world where you're shooting a session and you can't mess up, because if you mess up, you lose it, right? So how do you deal with that? And so all in all, to bring it together, I'm just excited to share what I have seen, what the Lord has helped me learn through this journey. And it really is about doing this untraditional learning by doing, getting a chance to put all these different skills from all these different avenues together. And I'm just blessed that the Lord has led me to this point.
Well, Abe, we've talked a lot over the years about storytelling and about film. And there's lots of people that argue that film is the storytelling medium of our day. And, there's an old fashioned part of me that grumbles about that. I used to read a tremendous amount, and I found that I had sort of drifted away from it. And the primary culprit was too much YouTube videos, and which is interesting because I didn't grow up watching TV, and I have never really been a big TV person at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I found that I was probably on YouTube far more than I would have ever been on the television. And I was surprised at how hard it was to kind of break that addiction. And then I've recently gotten back to reading a lot more, and I think that's good. And so I'm actually a big fan of that. And yet I don't think that that's really a very arguable point, right? I mean, I think that video is the storytelling medium of our age, and it's evidenced by the fact that, YouTube is as big as it is, and streaming
Mm.
services and all these kinds of things.
Yes. Hmm.
And so from my standpoint, this is a really powerful medium and a really important medium. And it's one that I think most people don't fully grasp either the importance of or the nuance of. So we've had countless conversations, honestly, in countless places, often over lunch at some restaurant somewhere.
Somewhere in the country.
Yeah, I can remember a sandwich shop in Harrisonburg where we really spent an
Mm.
hour or so just kicking around ideas and talking about, future projects and things like that. And so talk a little bit about that. When talk about people who are thinking about getting into film or maybe who don't understand film as being as powerful as it is. What's your perspective on this and its importance and kind of the stories and the way that the culture perceives itself and other things?
That is a great question. I think it is difficult to deny the influence that, as you said, Jonathan, the video has played such a role in the world today. And I think that it's an exciting time to be alive as someone who is either interested in video or film or storytelling in general, just because there is so much tools. Honestly, the bar of entry is so low. I was recently, well, many of you might know Michael, who worked with us, also former Unbound alumni. He is very proficient with his drone. I got a drone very, very, very similar to his recently, and just the amount of stuff you can get that 20 years ago you simply could not get, right? As
Well,
a videographer.
we shot a whole Navigate trailer for our class, and there's a big chunk of that Navigate that when we did it, I was like, man, 10 years ago we'd had to hire a helicopter, and
Oh, yeah.
and we shot that on a
Exactly.
budget that we don't even want to reveal how low that budget was. And so, but we have some really cool, awesome shots of us standing on cliffs and swooping
Yes.
through tunnels and they're like helicopter worthy shots and they just look amazing. And I remember being we filmed a few years ago, and I remember just being amazed thinking we couldn't have touched this with our entire budget. Like our entire company budget couldn't have paid for this shot just a few years ago.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think today it is such an exciting time to get into this world. But something I've also really been thinking about lately, actually, I heard this in a sermon about music. So, in a similar vein, but there's this concept of undistracting excellence. And so there is I would like to think, and I would like to say that most people today are captivated by stories and they know the importance of, like, YouTube is just such like almost everyone watches either YouTube or Instagram or something on TikTok, and everyone also has seen a commercial at some point, like television, and everything when it comes together does tell a story, right? So one of the things I want to emphasize in the video track is that you might not always be making a film. You might not always be creating a piece of art, honestly, but you are always storytelling. And what is the message you're trying to tell? When it comes to that, as this bar of entry is so low and everyone is trying to tell a story or share a message, then there comes the concept of undistracting excellence. As a believer, we believe that we serve the Lord, and there's a reason that we want to strive for excellence in our craft so that we serve Him by being good. And this is something where we don't rely on our own strength, again, to the kind of prideful, like, oh, we're going to be better than everyone else and whatnot. But there is a level of excellence that you need to have. And I think that is where being a believer in this world really shines through. Because going back to our earlier point, sharing about the journey, it's a difficult journey, and it takes a lot of endurance and patience and confidence and humility, the ability to push through, sometimes to be willing to learn and be humble enough to say, hey, I need to learn, or all these different things, right? And so all of this comes together into undistracting excellence, where we have an excellent, this undistracting that allows us to serve the Lord. And I think, again, that is such a key thing that is needed in videographers who follow Jesus today.
You mentioned that it's very easy for pretty much anybody today to see that video is a powerful medium of storytelling. And the instance that it comes to mind immediately for me would be, funny enough, we were talking about commercials earlier, like the Super Bowl commercials, where it's very easy to see the difference between, okay, this is just a regular corporate commercial that just has a slightly bigger budget, or they just threw a celebrity cameo in there, versus a commercial that is really truly telling a story. And those tend to be fewer and further between, but those commercials end up really standing out and having such an impression on people's minds when people approach them with an attitude of excellence. And so I just think it's really interesting that it goes to your point of how it can be such a really powerful art form, and it can be distributed to so many more people than we ever thought was imaginable 10, 15 years ago. And so it's just really cool to see and know the fact that there are Christians like yourself who are taking this art form so seriously and are wanting to look to approach it with excellence and with the mind of Christ.
Yeah. And it's just been something I've been thinking about a lot, because I think that in the world of, let's call it, Christian filmmaking, if you want to call it that, right? And Jonathan, you and I, we've had so many discussions about, like, we don't like that term.
We just had Briley on for an episode recently.
Yes.
Abe, so we spent a long time
Go
talking
listen
about
to that
Christian filmmaking.
episode.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I actually had a conversation with Briley very shortly after my wedding. It was a great conversation with me and Briley and Abby. And basically, there's no shortage of artists and people who have maybe even a vision, maybe even a passion for telling a story or presenting a message. But when it truly comes to people with the grit and the resilience to push through and either make their vision happen or do it with excellence, I think that's the part where I know in my journey, really struggled with. And once again, it comes back to this concept of, am I truly being a professional? Am I truly having undistracting excellence? And so I've talked to many other professionals, or just in the process of creating rap, or even with myself kind of selling my skills, or even just talking with other interested parties and parents. Basically, there's so many people who want to come to a studio or some production company or whatnot, and they're hoping to get a taste of the film world and learn and all these different things. But then these young people, unfortunately, realize that they're going to be doing a commercial for the rest of the year, or they're going to be shooting weddings for the next several months, and they really lose interest. And my thing, what I say to that is, you don't realize that that's in the monotonous things that you do and the tasks that are not like these big movies or art pieces, what are passion projects for you. That's where you learn the skills and the resilience, but truly so much more than that, the little details, how everything from how you position yourself, literally when you're holding a camera, to how to listen to people, how to catch certain moments, right? So I think that's such a important aspect that I'm hoping to bring into the video track as well, which is, you might not always be an artist. You might not always be doing something that is this grand piece of work that you're pouring your soul into. However, it is always a chance to learn. You have a chance to glorify Jesus by being undistractingly excellent. And this is a chance for you to really build the grit and the skills that will serve you as you take on the bigger projects that you're more passionate with along the way.
Not to mention the fact that whatever you need to learn in terms of stress and personalities and things like that, you will definitely learn in shooting weddings and dealing with the bride and the bride's mother and the wedding
Yes.
coordinator and the fact that you only have one shot, chance to get the shot. I mean, you talk about, I mean, there are some people that kind of, sort of poo-poo doing weddings or something like that. First of all, it's an extreme art form, and there's few things that has as much reward as being able to effectively capture somebody's really special day. So, Abe, I've seen you do this many times, and it takes incredible skill. It's an incredible gift, and it's an incredible thing. It's to create, to be able to give to somebody. But secondly, a little tongue in cheek here, but don't underestimate. Like, there's not quite the pressure like the pressure of getting that shot that's not going to ever happen again, or having to deal with the multiple personalities involved in a wedding on a day that tends to sort of stress everybody. So I just wanted to, you've offered a bit of an explanation for that, but I just wanted to kind of revisit this undistractable excellence. I think, to recap a little bit what you're saying, Abe, is that, look, the bar is really low. So anybody can tell a story. I mean, like, almost everybody's carrying in their pocket a camera that's 20 times more powerful than professional's best thing just a few short years ago, right? And so you've
Yes.
got this ability to do all this stuff. And yet, what happens is that somebody just shoots and they don't understand the depth of it. They don't understand what's actually going on.
Sure.
What you end up with is a video, but that a video where it's the lack of skill gets in the way of the story. And so, to my mind, when you say undistractable excellence, you're talking about, I'm going to use this really powerful medium. And the way you know that I can use it correctly is when the medium becomes invisible. When you are so immersed in the story that you don't think about the fact that you're watching a video, you're just having a story impact your brain.
Exactly.
And if you think about that, that takes a tremendous amount of skill. I think the flip of that would be, anybody can take pictures these days. But when you see a picture that evokes a feeling, that's a photographer. That's an artist. I can go and I can take a picture of the field and the sunset behind my house. And you would look at that and you're like, Jonathan took a picture of the field and sunset beside his house, right? I mean, like, it conveys, it is a representation of what happened. But a really talented photographer would take that picture and you would look at it and you would forget you were looking at a picture, and it would evoke a feeling of beauty or majesty or of wonder, or in some cases nostalgia or pain, or, I mean, like, I think about iconic, National Geographic covers or things like that. There's a lot of people that still remember the startling blue eyes of the Afghani woman that was on the cover of, I think it was National Geographic 20, 30 years ago or something like that. I mean, like, in other
Yes.
words, you didn't think about somebody took a picture, you saw that face, and it instantly just pulled you into it and made you wonder what was the story. And you could see the ravages of war being, reflected in the haunting beauty of that face. And it just evoked that feeling. So that's the kind of thing I think you're talking about. And I think when you're tempted to go, well, just anybody can shoot videos. It's worth backing up and say, yes, but can you shoot a video somebody that tells a story so effectively and so well that nobody thinks about it being a video? To David's point, I mean, like, when you watch a Super Bowl commercial and you're interested in the story and you forgot that you're being sold a product, that's when you know you have a commercial. When you're watching a commercial and you're like, yeah, this is a commercial with a lot of money
Exactly.
in it. That's not skill. That's just resources.
Exactly. And I use this term undistracting. It's so fascinating because, once again, this whole concept for me came from a sermon. Shout out to my worship leader, Caleb. If he ever listens to this podcast for whatever reason. But he was
You can recommend it to him, maybe. It's all right.
Yeah, there you go. Go listen to this episode, Caleb.
Tell him he gets a shout out. I mean, like, that'd make him listen.
Hey, yes. Shout out to Caleb Dernberger. Truly one of the most talented. The Lord has blessed him with the ability to lead worship. And that is the point. Yes, there is something where you're so immersed in a art form that you forget that, you're looking or listening to something. But the whole sermon was about how we praise the Lord, especially in the context of church and music. And I love how, once again, when we're talking about video, like art track, like all these different things will come together and inform what we do. But specifically, when it comes to, let's just say, worship for music, and also in the world of video, yes, when you are leading worship, the whole point is to understand your audience. So there are those like funny memes that you see on Instagram for Christian meme pages where it's Sunday worship and the drummer just like goes off crazy, for some drum solo or like the guitar solo. That's the point of you're distracting. Is it excellent? Sure. Is it good music? Yeah, arguable, but is that serving the purpose? No, right? And we know that. And so once again, this is something that even I still am figuring out and struggle with at times, because being a videographer, it kind of comes back to what I'm saying, is not just being an artist, but you are always a storyteller. You are not always an artist in expressing yourself and doing what you want. But as a videographer and as a professional, right, you are tasked with telling a story, and you are tasked with engaging with a certain audience. And you need to be humble enough, be aware enough, be skilled enough to be undistracting, to know what your audience is looking for, to know what your client is looking for, and to connect in that way, so that whatever you're doing is not saying, hey, look at my art, but say, hey, this is the message, this is the story. That is, again, something that is often lost. And when people talk about technology and video, because you can so easily be like, man, this video camera is so cool, or like these cool transitions. And we've seen this, right, with some Apex videos where, man, those are really cool shots of food, but that's not the point. If you know, I'll just say that.
But they were really cool shots, though.
Listeners, if you're listening, this is evidence of a journey that we've all taken at Unbound on what is good video and what is good storytelling. And there may have been a time when the lines were not quite as clear to us.
So yes, undistracting excellence, I think by God's grace, is how we, as in my case, in the world of video, learn to be confident and humble enough to pay attention, to learn to communicate, to see details that many others might not see, and find ways to really be undistracting in our excellence.
Well, that's an excellent summary. I think that's fantastic. It also ties nicely into some of the things that Sarah said regarding art, which is art at some level is defined by having a purpose. And I think that's gotten lost a little bit, or the purpose is shallow because people think the purpose is to express themselves. I like the idea that good storytelling, good videography, first is non-distracting, and secondly, in order to be non-distracting, has to have a story to tell, and has to be a story worth telling. And that's kind of, worth kind of examining a little bit as well, which is if you tell a self-absorbed story, if you tell a narcissistic story, it's distracting because the story itself is not compelling. And so those things go together, and I think taken together, there's a really phenomenal guide there. And so, look, if you have no interest or no eligibility for Unbound and our programs and stuff like that, I want you to hear what Abe has said about non-distracting excellence, because it is applicable in so many places. I'm not sure if there's a place that's not. What is it you're really trying to convey? Can you strip out everything that is distracting to that? That's going to require a high level of skill. It's going to require a high level of dedication. And that's kind of regardless of your art form. But if you're interested in learning this, maybe pay a little attention and see the kind of mentor that has gone before you and can bring you up the path and not only teach you the skills, but I think more importantly, teach you the meaning and the reasoning and the thinking behind it, which is ultimately what often sets apart those who get in, because there's a low bar, towards those that can succeed. So, Abe, it was wonderful to have you back. I'm sure we'll do it again very much in the future. We'll be together fairly shortly, so we'll look forward to that. And we'll be at Apex again in various capacities. And so that's just around the corner. But thanks for taking the time to be with us here for this episode. And welcome home.
Jonathan, David, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Well, it is always an honor, pleasure, and a lot of fun to have Abe back in the studio. And like I said, feel like a little bit of an imposter sitting here with Abe on the mic, and it was really fun to talk to him. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but I thought his segment on undistracted excellence was really interesting and applies to so many things. And if you're interested in art of any kind, or how Christians should navigate art, man, listen to this episode. Listen to our recent episode with Sarah, actually both our episodes with Sarah, and listen to the episode with Briley. We could almost turn these into a mini course. There's just some really good wisdom and perspective on being creative in the arts that I think that they brought here recently. So this was a nice capstone to that.
Yeah, it's been super encouraging just because I have seen so many Christians who have been so distraught by what they see as just such a downward spiral in what seems to be the morality of the general popular media and the utter lack of quality in Christian media. And so it's just really refreshing to hear from a lot of highly talented, highly motivated young Christians who are working to change that, and being able to be involved with what they're doing in some form or another is just something that I'm really grateful to be able to do.
And hey, not to brag about this, but every one of those Christians that are highly talented that David happened to talk about all have one thing in common, and that is they are Unbound alums. And so if you are interested in joining those kinds of talented, exciting people, and if you want to be a part of solutions to that instead of just complaining about the kind of things that you see in media and don't like, take a look and check out Unbound. Beunbound.us talks about our programs, including the videography track, our art tracks, our writing tracks, and most recently, our digital media track. And there are some really talented, I think, exciting people doing some really exciting stuff in those areas. And if you want to be a part of that, that's where you go to find out more. Anything else you want to add, David?
I would just say thank you all so much for listening, and join us next week. We might be talking with someone else who is a professional in another field, or someone who is extraordinary at ordinary things. But regardless, in the meantime, be unbound.